Within hours of Amnesty International accusing the Israeli Defense Forces of war crimes because of the summer slaughter in besieged Gaza, a Palestinian cabinet minister died as protesters were fired on by the IDF in the West Bank. Even after an autopsy, it's disputed whether he was murdered. 12,000 Palestinians, though, were wounded or killed in Gaza, and nearly 600 Gazan children lost their lives in the 50-day war. David Cameron, though, continues to arm Israel, and except for token recognition of Palestine supported by Labour, Britain is very much part of the Israeli war effort. Jerusalem-born journalist Mira Bar-Hillel has just written a piece in The Independent about how corruption influences lethal British policy. Welcome, Mira, to Going Underground. So how does it influence British policy in Parliament?
In the usual way. Money buys influence, influence buys policies. I'm afraid it's as simple as that, and we're becoming very close to the American model of AIPAC, the American-Israeli Committee, which controls a lot of US foreign policy.
Well, the US is famous for AIPAC, the Arab-Israeli Political Affairs Committee. What do you think of BICOM, the one we have? It's surely not as effective.
The real political influence arises with the Conservative Friends of Israel and the Labour Friends of Israel in Parliament and at the heart of power.
And half the shadow cabinet, I understand, were Conservative Friends of Israel members in 2010. We don't have accurate figures now, really, on who's in, who's out. Ed Miliband's not a member, as far as I know. Is David Cameron a member of the Conservative Friends of Israel?
Not directly. That's another thing. AIPAC is relatively transparent. Conservative Friends of Israel, not transparent at all. Nobody knows who funds them. The membership, I've never asked, actually. But again, it doesn't actually even matter whether you're a member or not. The power they wield is straight to number 10, and it goes well beyond democracy or anything else.
But David Cameron he's not short of a few bob. Why does he need money from the Conservative Friends of Israel? I mean, he went to the annual Dorchester dinner and praised Israel for protecting innocent life, in fact.
Yes. Yeah, well, that tells you all you need to know. I have to doff my cap here to Peter Oborne, my very senior colleague who has written about this and issued pamphlets about this. He researched it quite a lot back in 2009, not that anything has changed, and he came to the conclusion, because he was told by Conservative members of Parliament, you don't mess with Conservative Friends of Israel. You just don't mess with them. And he went on to say, to record, that a man called Pollack, I've never heard of him, never heard of him before, never heard of him since, because he operates behind the scenes. He is a secretary, apparently, of Conservative Friends of Israel, and he went to see the Prime Minister, according to Peter Oborne, and told him in no uncertain terms that nothing relating to, say, the Gaza attacks. This government, the British government, never even used the word disproportionate. Never mind much stronger stuff that came on and off from the White House. He was banned from using the word disproportionate by Stephen Pollack.
The Prime Minister was banned?
Yes.
I think I saw those claims initially.
Yes.
Okay, if the politicians...
They've never been denied, neither by Pollack nor by 10 Downing Street.
If the politicians are all in with this lobby, what about the media itself? I know that BICOM will be one of the complainants to Ofcom if I don't mention the fact that the media here, during the Gaza conflict, very keen to report the fact that it was Hamas rocket fire that was catalyzing the incoming fire into the besieged Gaza Strip.
Which it was, absolutely true. Hamas fired, but the rockets that they fired, they were rockets. The fact is that actually none of them hit anything. The number of casualties on the Israeli side from rocket fire, I believe, was 2, and one of them was a Thai guest worker. The other one was a Bedouin, and they actually don't count in Israel, I'm afraid to say, because they're not Jews and they're not one of us, and therefore, just like the Gazan kids, their lives are forfeit because they're not us. They are the enemy. You know, mass media reporting of all these issues I find very, very troubling in this country.
But then the Prime Minister must have seen the fact that the rockets weren't effective and that the huge amounts of arms, some of it supplied by Britain. Okay. This word disproportionate, then, it didn't get used, did it, by any of the other political parties, except perhaps the major political parties, except the Greens, maybe?
I wasn't looking out for what the political parties were using. because it was used widely in the press. I have to say, the press and the media did use the word disproportionately quite a lot. And since after Channel 4 started sending reporters there, and you can see the shock on their faces while they were reporting live from Gaza, the BBC felt it had to do something, and then they started reporting properly on Gaza, which they were not doing initially. You can't look at that kind of devastation, those kinds of young, tiny bodies being taken to hospital, and not be moved, and not realize that if you're somehow told, oh, this is all Hamas's fault, that it's propaganda.
But the anti-Semitic charge is one that is still made again and again, even against journalists, maybe even against you.
A lot against me all the time.
What are politicians, let alone journalists, supposed to do when they're routinely attacked for favouring the word disproportionate when it comes to the summer's war?
They should, but they won't, have the courage of their own convictions and beliefs and stand up and say, look, if you want to call me anti-Semitic, call me anti-Semitic. You've abused that word so badly now that it means nothing. It just means that you don't like me.
What happened to you when you wrote this article that makes all these allegations, even of the previous foreign secretary receiving tens of thousands of pounds on this influence of the lobby? What happened to you when you wrote the article?
Nothing that hadn't happened before, because it began when I wrote another piece in The Independent saying why I was considering burning my Israeli passport. And that was downloaded 2.5 million times. It started then. I actually block people if they abuse me, in the sense of threatening me, of anyone who wants to call me a Nazi will be blocked. It's just because they're not even worth engaging with. But I still keep a lot of people on with Twitter who hate my guts, and have reported me to the police. I've been reported to the police. I've had my employers have received letters demanding that I be sacked. I take these things in my stride.
And as we reach the election, what about coordinated corruption, as it were, that you're alleging in the run-up to the election when it comes to the parties needing to fill their coffers from different groups?
Well, again, I hesitate to use the word corruption. I think it's become too universal and endemic to, the word again is being devalued. Corruption is, I give you £10,000 and you give me planning permission for a hotel. That's or worse in other countries. It's not so much corruption as nibbling away at the integrity of the whole process, which in a way is worse than corruption. It's undermining the credibility of the process of democratic government, which we do have in this country, and of which I'm very, very proud.
And the credibility of the Foreign Office, presumably, which is at the front end.
The Foreign Office is behind this. Pollack went direct to number 10. The Foreign Office has always been considered very suspect in Israel because of their background and, they're all Arabists, they're all pro-Arab. Well, one reason might be that the Arabs have outnumbered the Jews by a big factor always, and therefore upsetting them may not be a terribly good idea for anybody. In this country, the Jews, although when I ask people how many, what proportion of Jewish people they think there is in this country, it's invariably around the 5% that they think. The truth
0.5,
is 0.5%, half of a percent. Muslims, about 2 to 3%. Again, you have to be mad not to think that in pure electoral terms, and in terms of your responsibility to your constituents, you do have to consider the will of the larger minority over those of the tiny minority.
So just finally, what should we do then if every new foreign secretary gets a memo on his desk from this gentleman saying this is the policy on the Middle East? What are the people supposed to do?
Treat it with the contempt it deserves. You're no better or worse than anyone else, and you will be treated just like anyone else. But the other thing is, along with being accused about being anti-Semitic, which is considered to be such a toxic title, that very few people will stand up against it. They prefer to just give up, like Yasmin Alibai-Brown, for example.
The journalist on The Independent as well.
Indeed, yes, and a Muslim woman who is very forthright in her opinions, and for which I have a great deal of respect. But she wrote an article saying, I'm intimidated by the threat of being described as anti-Semitic. Well, don't be intimidated. Stand up and say, call me what you like. You know, I know in my own heart that I am right, and I will not be bullied out of saying so. We should all do that. And then, again, we should all remind ourselves that being against Israel is not the same as being anti-Semitic. And the more everybody insists that it is, the more it becomes so. Which I'm trying to say is that if the Jewish community in this country and elsewhere stands with Israel, shoulder to shoulder, right or wrong, beginning to end, then they have become that entity. They are with Israel, and therefore anti-Israeli feelings will encompass them. They must learn that and accept that, just like we must learn and accept that the title or the label anti-Semite is not the end of the world.
Mira Bar-Hillel, thank you. Going Underground contacted Downing Street press office for a response to allegations made in that interview, but they weren't able to comment in time for this broadcast. Conservative Friends of Israel said they had no comment on the allegations raised in that interview.